Okay team, in the interests of time, we'll make a start this afternoon. Can I have a show of hands from everyone who's met someone new today? I've definitely met a few people. I guess another show of hands for someone who's learned something in a field they knew nothing about before. Great. Okay, so I think we've already achieved some of our symposium objectives on day one. Thanks for all joining us again for this panel discussion at the end of the day. So in our organising committee, when we were developing the program for the symposium, we really wanted to include some sessions where we were able to facilitate shared learnings by drawing out diverse perspectives. So a key aim of the symposium is to bring together people from different sectors to continue to build those partnerships and enhance the way we work together. So an aim of the panel discussions is really around facilitating shared learnings, bringing out different perspectives. Partly a listening session for you in the audience as well. We also wanted the panel discussions to synthesise insights across those different sessions that have happened today. So I imagine nearly everyone was in a position today where they had to choose between a few talks that they would have liked to see that were happening all at the same time. So to make sure we're drawing together knowledge from all of those sessions, we asked our panel and facilitator to share one of their take-home messages from what they saw in the talks today. So I'm going to hand over to Libby Evans-Illidge to introduce herself and the panel and the topic for discussion today. Thanks, Libby.
Thanks, Mia. And hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back to this session. So my name's Libby Evans-Illidge, and I am from the Australian Institute of Marine Science, where I have the great privilege of being part of developing our Indigenous Partnerships program. And it's great to have this opportunity to reflect on today. I have spent most of the day in this room, but I've had a couple of spies in the other two rooms, and so I can say with confidence that creating strong and effective partnerships really is a cross-cutting theme of this symposium. And just reflecting on that, some of the common denominators across all of the sessions is about connections between people and also connections with the reef and everybody's deep love and care for the Great Barrier Reef. And that sometimes these relationships are very deep and long-term, and we heard this morning about a 45-year partnership between the state government and the Commonwealth government in the management of the reef. And we've also heard a lot about the challenges of scaling at a whole range of different levels in order to address the issues that are now faced by the reef. And in the last plenary session, we heard about some of the regulatory, financial and logistical challenges of being able to meet those challenges. There are a range of different players. We've heard about the government players, and the Commonwealth and the state, but also the government partners in the Reef Trust Partnership and all of the other government agencies that have some sort of an interest in management and the health of the reef. In the other sessions particularly, we heard from all of our wonderful science organisations, the partners in the Reef Restoration and Adaptation Program. We heard about the importance of ecological intelligence and monitoring, and particularly being able to understand the depth of the components of the reef ecosystem and how it all fits together, and also the modelling that's going to bring all of that knowledge together so that we can have the best possible knowledge base in order to create the best possible evidence for good decision making. We've heard about the tourism industry and the importance that they play both in earning a living on the reef but also as participants and partners in caring for the reef. And we heard about the potential for other industry players. For example, the aquaculture industry may play an important role in helping to scale up the production of baby corals for reef seeding. We heard about the importance of community partners, particularly in the community panels that are convened at the moment. Wonderful citizen science initiatives, and we heard a number of things, including the Great Reef Census. But I think something that I really want to reflect on before I hand over to the panel is that the positioning of traditional owners at the forefront of reef business. So I was reflecting that it was 30 years ago that Bob Muir, younger Bob Muir, put that Aboriginal flag into the beach in front of the Great Keppel Island Resort and declared possession of the unallocated state land for the Woppaburra people. And, you know, some years later, that land was handed back, but at that time also there was the creation of the Reef Forum, which actually was an effective mechanism for traditional owners to have a say in reef business. Now, 30 years later, we're now faced with having to recreate something like the Reef Forum. But in the meantime, today, we also heard about a whole range of projects where traditional owners played a role in participating in the work, learning about developing new skill sets to be able to participate in reef restoration. And we also heard about projects that are genuinely co-designed and even traditional owner-led. But we now have a traditional owner implementation plan for Reef 2050, and I was really pleased to hear that last year, 2023, we have a new intergovernmental agreement between the state government, the Commonwealth government, and the third party to this agreement is the Traditional Owner Task Force, with a commitment to establish a Sea Country Alliance and resource and implement the Traditional Owner Implementation Plan. So we were almost there 30 years ago with the Sea Forum, and now we're coming back to that position and the reliance on traditional owners and positioning traditional owners where they need to be at the forefront of traditional owner business. So with that, that's my take on today. I'm now going to hand over. We might just go from right to left. I might start with you, Phil. If you would like to introduce yourself and give us your key take-home messages from the talks you attended today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of this land as well. Thank you to Goodyu this morning for giving us a warm welcome to their country here and the neighbouring groups. I'm a Nawagi person from around the Ingham area, and like Bob, you saw he mentioned me this morning with a lot more hair. As you can see, I have less hair now, but we've been involved with this for a long time, I suppose. But the take-home message for me with this whole stuff that we've been hearing, that I've been hearing all day, is partnerships and how we build stronger partnerships. Because at the moment, you know, that reef out there is in a lot of trouble, and the partnership that we've enjoyed and our people have enjoyed for 1,000 years was exactly that, a relationship between us and our country and the reef. And that relationship, that partnership has been there for 1,000 years. We've got to look at different partnerships now. And that reef really deserves that partnership, that relationship between us. And it's bringing us together like never before. So this is a time for us to really come together with new partnerships and developing new relations, because that reef demands it. It's crying out for us to come together. Where once it was a relationship between us and that reef, we stood alone. Now we've got to stand together, because that reef's in a really bad way, you know, and we've got to do what we can, I suppose, to really, you know, look after it for our future generations. A lot of the traditional owners along the East Coast here say that is our Uluru, and it's our you heard Bob this morning reading that speech there this morning, the healing of country and all this sort of stuff, and it's so true. So this is a new partnership that we've got to really embrace now, because we really have to. And that's the biggest thing for me for this morning was this new partnership building between ourselves and relationships.
Thanks, Phil, and afternoon, everyone. Bruce Taylor from CSIRO. I guess reflecting on today, and particularly sitting in the session in this room, it struck me that the language that we use around partnering and partnerships is is pretty ubiquitous in the environmental management or natural resource management, health, community development space. You know, it's a word that we use regularly and sometimes not particularly thoughtfully. And what struck me from a lot of the presentations today is that they really embodied a lot of those core principles of good partnership working. I heard a lot of people talk about the importance of recognising diverse motivations of partners. So partners can agree to work together, but they don't all necessarily have to subscribe to the same songbook. You know, you can be partnering for different reasons, and that's okay. You know, it might be, I mean, I heard Nicole mention altruism as a really dominant rationale for partnering versus maybe, you know, in other cases it was about learning and knowledge sharing, or in other cases it was about providing opportunities for employment and other benefits. And I guess the other key factor in partnering that I heard today was a lot of discussions around the importance of mutual benefit. So it can't just be one way. A partnership isn't something where one partner engages another to achieve its objectives. There has to be two-way flow of benefit to all the parties involved. And I think a lot of the examples that people spoke to today, I really heard that, so that was great to hear.
Thank you. My name's Nicole. I'm from ZigZag Whitsundays, so I work in tourism. I think that today I definitely felt an overarching sense of optimism that despite everything that the Reef is going through, there are so many wonderful people that are working on it. They're finding ways to solve these complex problems. And I think one of the favourite quotes I got from today was that building resilience is a puzzle and everyone has a piece of that puzzle. And I think that for a long time, science has been seen as working for scientists rather than working with the community and to share that information. And so now working with these partnerships and in the collaborations, people are no longer working in isolation, and that's going to benefit everybody. I also really liked the idea of a reef intervention industry. Sign me up, please.
So I think that I'm now going to ask you all what you think makes a good partnership, but you've kind of already answered that. So my next question is about perhaps the challenges associated with collaborating across disciplines and across sectors, and what you think might have been the key barriers that have prevented effective partnerships in the past that we're now able to overcome, or perhaps we're still to overcome. Who would like to go first?
Is that on?
Yes.
Excellent. So I think that flexibility plays a big role in cooperative partnerships, whether it's being flexible or the inability to be flexible. Sometimes the timing of research may not be compatible with the availability of the infrastructure. I think understanding is also essential, whether it's for the requirements of the level of involvement that's actually going to be needed, and also involving many different players. So you see a lot of marine science graduates moving into tourism and becoming reef educators. It would be good to see the flow go both ways. So maybe people that are studying marine science before going on to develop some of these projects could spend some time working in the tourism industry so that they can gain a better understanding of how they can work their projects in with us, or even having someone from, say, the tourism industry or whichever industry you're collaborating with involved in project development.
So do you think that there might be an opportunity for some kind of internship or work integrated learning or something like that for undergraduates to go and spend an amount of time working with a tourism operator?
Yeah, I definitely think that industry placements would be really, really beneficial. You know, they'd gain experience not just with the industry, but also like on water, doing practical field work and engaging with the public.
Great. So all of the people here from universities who facilitate work integrated learning placements, that's a great opportunity to explore. Okay, anybody else want to talk about some of the challenges that you've experienced in some of the partnerships or how you've overcome them?
I'm not sure if it's a barrier as such, but I think certainly some of the considerations that come into play working across sectors in particular is that we can often come from very different starting points, you know, different languages, even different cultural backgrounds and expectations, and also, you know, people having access to different levels of resourcing when coming into a partnership, and those sort of factors can be quite influential. And, you know, one of the strategies, certainly not the only strategy, but one of the strategies for getting around some of those differences can often be, and again, what I heard today is people being willing to spend time, not just in doing the partnership, but building the partnership. And so that time, that relationship building, that trust is fundamental when you're basically often talking or coming from different places. And also I think the importance of having someone in the broader group, and sometimes that's another organisation or a mutual friend who's really good at brokering and understands how partnerships work, and can help build and structure that relationship.
Yeah, I think there are many challenges when for traditional owners, this has been part of our life, the challenges that we've had to endure and deal with for many, many years, and how we deal with that stuff as a minority group, as a marginalised group of people in society is very challenging for us, and partnerships is definitely the way, in my experience, to move forward with this stuff. I think some of the other challenges is leadership. I think it was mentioned earlier. You know, I sometimes call it rat bag leadership, you know, leadership that's not responsible and so forth, and respectful, and appreciate each other's space and place in this whole thing. But it always comes back to people and the relationship between ourselves and each other, and how we respect each other and appreciate each other is the key to moving forward with everything, I think. And if we have that as a fundamental base, then I think we can achieve anything, you know, despite the challenges.
They're great insights. One of the comments that we heard quite a lot today was that this space is sort of no longer feels competitive, and rather it's collaborative, and I think that that's come through very strongly, certainly in the talks in this session. What about adjusting and adapting to partnerships in response to change? How do you think that's likely to change in the future?
We talked this morning about how long people like Bob and myself have been involved in this thing, and I was talking to Sue Barrell this morning about it as well, and we wonder why we are not further down the track than we should be with this stuff when you're doing it for so long, you know, and it gets really tiresome, and you can be burnt out and all the rest of it, and that's part of the challenge as well, and we've got to deal with that, you know. I think part of the problem, in my view, is this stop-start mentality and lack of leadership and the change in government and all this sort of stuff. So we've got to go back and the change in leaderships within organisations and so forth. And you get that, you know, in one of the constant in this whole debate around the reef is traditional owners. And they're always going to be there. They're always going to be, you know, doing this stuff, and you know, we've got to pass the baton on to the younger ones as we go along. But they'll always be there, and sometimes the leadership is challenging within that as well. But I really think the stopping, starting, and all this sort of stuff is, you know, you want to build critical mass and momentum and really keep that going all the way through, you know. But it's very difficult to do that when you haven't got the proper leadership, the right leadership, and the support around that to make that happen. So I think how we build it, and this is a really good start, and I'd really like to see the momentum really build, Libby, and continue on with what we're doing. But I think that's a real problem, to stop and start business.
So that's about the longevity of the funding commitment, as well as the government's and the leadership's commitment. And you also sort of touched on succession planning, and Bob mentioned that in his plenary this morning about the succession planning within the Wapabara eldership, moving to the next generation. Are you seeing that happen as well amongst other traditional owner groups? And I guess that should apply to all of us. None of us are going to be here in 50 years' time, so, or maybe less, but maybe more for some of us. But just quickly, I'll stop there. I'll just dig deeper. But so you're seeing that happen across the board?
Yeah, I think that we're seeing more and more that happen. And again, the resources to make that happen, whether it's finances or manpower or whatever, then that needs to happen. And there's this different system as well. There's this Aboriginal system and the leadership that's needed there. We hear from time to time, somebody else's turn to step up now. But what does that mean? How do we support that person to step up? Not only in a white fella context, but in a black fella context as well. The knowledge, the understanding, the way that Aboriginal people have been doing business for a long time, our connection to each other, and our respect for each other, and all the rest of it. Man's business, woman's business. We were at a conference, a men's business conference, a few weeks ago, and the idea, one of the main things there was, how do we as men deal with the cultural load that we have, not only in our personal life at home and our families and that, but in our professional life as leaders within our community. And that's a huge question. How do we deal with that cultural load? We're still working out how we can do that, but that's a huge, and that's part of leadership and succession planning as well. For our younger people, both men and women. So it's a challenge. We face so many challenges in our business. Apart from doing the business, there's so many other challenges in amongst ourselves as well.
Panellists, anything to add to that?
I think when we're wanting to build partnerships that are adaptable to change, it's really important that we have those strong relationships that are built on trust and honesty, and that we can actually openly communicate with each other. When we have problems that arise that might change the relationship or change our ability to be involved in a project, we need to be able to talk to the other collaborators about that without feeling judged or without feeling like we're going to be letting people down. I think you touched on changes in government, and I think that's a really good point, because continuity of work is really important. If we're going to be changing our businesses to be involved in projects, we need to know that those changes that we've made to allow us to do that work are going to continue. We're not going to have this stop-start approach and potentially have a long period where we don't have an income because we've directed all of our resources towards this one project, which has now come to an end. So that's definitely a challenge. But again, if there's open and honest communication between all of the partners, then that can be overcome.
Bruce, have you got something to add? Yes, we've got time, I think. Yep.
I guess just reflecting on some of the sort of R&D or science-based partnerships that CSIRO and myself have been part of over the last 4 or 5 years, and I think one of the really critical elements of those is sort of having a shared sense of vision or mission that the partners really subscribe to, and a common goal. And I guess in the context of the question about how those partnerships change and survive change over time is that you do have to, as a group of partners, regularly sort of reaffirm or return to or recommit to that goal and be conscious of what is changing around you as you're doing that, and that you're adapting the partnership to be more fit for purpose and fit for context. So I think that's a really important thing. Like any relationship, it has to be tended, and having that shared sense of mission is kind of really critical, and returning and recommitting to that mission over time is a...
Fabulous, yeah. Any comments from the floor for the panellists? Or from whoever's keeping an eye on Slido? Have we got any questions about creating strong and effective partnerships in this space? Well, we might wrap it up there, Mia, if there's no further questions. Or are there any final closing comments that you'd like to make, Phil, Bruce or Nicole? Okay, back to our
Thank you,
MC.
Libby. I'm sure there must be some questions from the floor though. So we'll give you a moment to overcome your reticence to walk down to the microphones at the front. Questions from the floor? Yes, thank you. Yeah, please come on down.
This isn't a new question really. It's probably come up many, many times before, but it's certainly been highlighted to me today and yesterday. Science and scientific research is a complex business. We've created our own languages, and within our fields we have created even further languages. We need, in my view, to be able to distill that down to messages easily understood by Year 9 students. And I say that because maybe we can capture them before they go off to do another career move. And so everybody around Australia can understand it and hopefully support what we are so passionate about. So my question to the panel is, if they have any comments about how we could go about achieving that, please let us know.
High school students' interest in careers
No,
in this space?
simplifying our scientific messages to Year 9 language and getting them out publicly.
I think that one effective method of this communication is the tourism industry, and especially when we're working in partnership with the researchers, that is a really effective way of us learning the ins and outs of the research, and we are very used to talking to people on that level. So then we can take what you've said to us and we can, for want of a better word, dumb it down so that people can understand it, as well as they see us as a trusted source of information. So their willingness to take that message on board can be stronger than if they're being just spoken at by somebody in a language that they don't necessarily understand.
Any other comments? I mean, I've probably got a comment about that because within the Indigenous Partnerships team at AIMS, we put a lot of effort into science communication and interpreting the, I think you saw the diagram at Bob's plenary this morning, and those that were at the workshop yesterday would have seen it as well. So we work a lot with our scientists to produce fact sheets and presentations so that the consent that we seek from traditional owners is truly fully informed. But it's a really tricky situation. It's about using accessible language, but not necessarily dumbing it down, because we do want that consent to be fully informed. So we've got to tell the whole story, and we've just got to find a way to do that properly. So that was a really good comment. Thank you.
And I guess in the context of partnerships as well, I guess my experience has been it's a lot about being able to tell a shared story, to be able to formulate a story and share and tell that shared story and tell it in a way in which all the partners can own that story and connect to it. I think those stories that we tell about ourselves and who we work with and how we work are fundamental to, I think, being able to get up in the morning and go again the next day, you know, when you're dealing with a challenge which is as significant as the one that we're facing in the Reef. And so stories can be a really, really powerful way of framing relationships and framing, our goals and objectives.
Okay, any other questions? Here's one.
Yeah, sorry, Barbara had a question first, and then we'll go to you. Thank you. Barbara.
Thanks. Libby, your comment earlier about the increasing collaboration and, reduced kind of cutthroat competition in this space was a good one. And some of that's due to, people putting much more effort and the amount of goodwill there is in order to achieve outcomes for the Great Barrier Reef. But I suspect some of it may also be because we're going through a period of growth at the moment. We're trying to grow our capacity to deal with these very urgent challenges, and there's been money backing that growth. I was wondering if the panel had thoughts on how we maintain that collaborative mindset if down the line we go through a period of shrinkage.
Oh, that's a good question. Who would like to tackle that? Well, Phil's already told us that the traditional owners will still be there. Yeah.
I think you hinted in part at one of the drivers, Barbara, which is around having investors who expect us to work together, like as a requirement for accessing resources. And even though that might be a pretty strong, nudge, more of a push or a pull factor sort of thing, I think, over the last few years in particular, it's been a particularly important factor in bringing parties together to work together on shared problems and being able to articulate the value of working together. I think in terms of your question about future uncertainty, I'm being optimistic in terms of the fact that I think the culture that's been built around collaboration in the Reef is very strong, and I think there's enough shared intent and shared commitment to kind of see through any sort of bumps in the road in the short term. I mean, that's my feeling.
Phil, do you want to make a comment?
My hope is that we don't see any shrinking in this area, but I think from the tourism perspective, there is an expectation from our passengers that we will be involved in some kind of conservation, sustainability efforts, and that's only growing. And so eventually I see a point where the businesses that aren't involved in those kinds of projects aren't actually operational because people don't choose to travel with them. So that's definitely a big push for us to be involved, whether it is financially beneficial working on those projects or not. And I also think that, I am hopeful that there will just be more and more growth in this area, as it is just an expectation that this work is done, and people are not going to sit back and let all of this work just stop and for things to deteriorate. People really, really care, and the care is just increasing.
I think from a traditional perspective, and I'm just talking about from my own self here, is that I think as a collective we have to look at it from a sustainable perspective, and whatever that is, come up with some sort of limit, and hopefully the limits based on sustainability of the environment, the reef and everything is out there. And if we agree to that as a collective, then we should try to stay with that. From a traditional perspective, we've been always in a deficit position a lot of times, and we have to make decisions about how many turtle we hunt, or how many dugong we hunt, and all this sort of business, because above all else, you won't have any culture if you haven't got those animals in the water. So I think it's always got to be a sustainable question. And when we decide on what's sustainable, then I think that we really need to try and stick to that. Otherwise, we're gonna lose it.
Okay, I think we have another question.
Consulting company, Footprint Energy. I just wanted to continue with the point that the previous speaker made about simplifying the message for Year 9 students. Just as a background, the OECD in 2015 did a survey of 15-year-old students worldwide, and including the Australian students, about 8,000 of them. 2/3 of them are pessimistic about the future of the environment over the next 20 years. Now, that's the environment, not only marine environment, the environment. And so the message needs to get to these children that there is some positive elements for the future. Otherwise, some of them are suffering from depression, are saying, what's the point in having kids if they're going to die? And so just to let you know that there is a need for students at high school to be given a message that is accurate, but perhaps has some positivity about it. Otherwise, that it can lead to a lot of social problems. And as I say, that's what some students are saying. And the worst part about it is the intelligent students, the high-performing students who are pessimistic about the future of the environment. So my suggestion is that in any environmental situation, it's great to be alert and to do something, but also give something positive to them because they need it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think ecological grief, I think, is the term, is probably something that we all feel at some point or another. But would anyone on the panel like to comment further about the need for keeping some positives in the message when we're talking about the challenges, the environmental challenges that we face?
I'm also part-time CEO of the Girringun Aboriginal Corporation based out of Carl, which represents 9 traditional owner groups over a huge area. And that's, from a traditional owner perspective, that speaks volumes about partnerships, starting with ourselves as traditional owners first and foremost. And in our organisation, we started a program through the Junior Ranger program, and we're hoping that it'll become bigger than just the Junior Ranger stuff, you know. So any of the kids in our school, we've got about 30 schools in our footprint, and we are working with kids from prep all the way through, and we're trying to develop a localised cultural curriculum about what that might look like, talking to different groups within the footprint, and coming up with what they think that should be involved in a cultural curriculum, a localised cultural curriculum. And it is about that messaging, it is about identity, it's about belonging, and it doesn't matter in our program whether you're black or Aboriginal. You are part of that program if you like, you know. But it is about the messaging, it's about that identity and belonging, and being developing and progressing the game changes of the future, and really getting that right message with the game changes of the future, irrespective of whether it's about research or whatever, but it's the basic essence of law and custom and all this sort of stuff that's really important, that we want all our kids to really understand and appreciate, and those game changes will change the way we do business in the future, I think, with a really strong sense of, you know, all that I spoke about.
Any other final comments on that last point? I think you were looking like you want to say something.
I'll try and keep it brief, but I think that's a really excellent point. There is a lot of people that are really struggling with the outlook for the future, and when we provide some of our messaging on the boat, it can be a bit challenging to find a way to present the threats to the reef, climate change to our passengers without it being a doom and gloom message. And I think that's why some of these partnerships can become so important, and some of the work that's being done here is so important, because once we've told people all of these really negative information, we can then turn around and say, hey, but these are the things that we're doing to help. These are ways that you can help. I've also seen the school that my kids go to, they regularly have people come in and talk to the kids about environmental impacts, environmental threats, but also like the positive work that's being done. So the seagrass restoration project, they regularly get the kids involved. They take them out to the seagrass meadows and they get them to help pick the flowers and things like that. So they're not just hearing about these positive things that are happening, but they're also experiencing them.
Yeah, great. So that's probably a nice thing to finish on before we hand back to our lovely MC. You know, the importance of these effective partnerships, and I guess we just need to look after each other in these challenging times. So over to you, Mia.
Thank you so much, Libby. Thank you, audience, for your questions. Please join me in a round of applause for our panel. Thanks for their insights. Okay, so a briefing about tomorrow morning. So we're starting tomorrow morning alongside our theme of facilitating shared learnings and capturing diverse perspectives. Tomorrow morning we'll commence with a World Cafe style workshop. So we'll invite you all to arrive around 8:15, move promptly into this room. We'll be doing a workshop exercise around these round tables before moving into our plenary by Roger Beeden from the Reef Authority. So that's tomorrow morning. Please come prepared for discussing and sharing your perspectives. Really looking forward to that session. There'll be a similar version of that for our online participants, obviously not working around round tables, but working through the same topics that we'll be working through in the room. Now, I believe it's time for us all to move downstairs for a welcome function. So we're kicking off downstairs at 5 p.m. Please don't disappear from the venue. Move from this room downstairs to bar 36. We'll have some mingling, networking, some canapes, an address from Senator Nita Green, and some of our other distinguished guests speaking as well. So thank you everyone for today. See you all downstairs soon for a welcome.